You don't need amazing drawing skills to create cool characters. You just need a simple idea and a good process. Watch this basic shape turn into a fully rendered character. And trust me, coloring changes everything.
I always start with the roughest sketch possible. And I mean rough. Just let your hand move. Don't judge it, don't fix it. The more freely you sketch here, the more personality your character picks up. By the way, I'm drawing this on one of the most basic beginner Wacom tablets out there. If you've been waiting to start because of gear, that excuse is gone now. Right now, I'm just hunting for a silhouette that feels alive, something with attitude. And listen, this sketch looks like nothing right now, but when we hit the coloring stage, you won't believe it's the same drawing. So don't go anywhere. Once your first rough sketch is done, lower that layer's opacity and sketch right over it. This time a little cleaner, a little more defined. This is where you start pulling out the character's details and building a solid structure before moving to line art. Adjust your smoothing value to whatever feels natural at this stage. A bit higher than before usually helps with cleaner lines. And don't be afraid to repeat this pass as many times as you need. Lower the opacity, sketch again, refine again. Good characters are built in layers, not born perfect on the first try. I've sped through some of the sketching here to keep things moving, but the full process, start to finish, is all here. Keep watching. Once your sketch feels solid enough, lower that final sketch layer's opacity and open a clean new layer for line art. Set your brush size and smoothing before you start. Line art comes first because it makes everything that comes after, coloring, shadows, lighting, so much easier to control. Now, don't get discouraged here. I'm not joking when I say I redrew this eye probably 10 times before it looked right. You'll actually see that in the footage. Me trying, failing, trying again. That's not a beginner mistake. It's just how line art works. I trimmed some of the slower parts to keep the video moving, but I didn't cut anything important. If you stay until the end, you'll see the full thing. Line art, coloring, shadows, and lighting. Every step. One of my older character videos hit over 200K views, and I still get comments every week asking, what brush is that? How do you color without going outside the lines? How do you get that soft lighting effect? I'll answer all of it in this video, and I'm linking that video in the description too, worth checking out after this one. But right now, tell me in the comments, which part of line art do you struggle with the most? Lines, curves, or just knowing where to even start? One of the most common questions I got on my previous character videos was about the brush I was using. Since those videos didn't have voiceover, a lot of people thought I was using some special custom brush for the line art. But honestly, I'm just using Photoshop's default basic brushes. The reason the lines look thin on the edges and thicker in other parts is simply because I'm drawing with a Wacom tablet. When I press lightly, the line gets thinner, and when I press harder, it becomes thicker. So if you're using a drawing tablet, you most likely already have the exact same brush on your computer right now. In this video, I'll zoom in and show the exact brush settings and sizes while I work, so everything is easier to follow. Another thing that confused people in the older videos was the shortcuts I use while drawing. Since I've been doing character design for years, I sometimes switch tools automatically without even thinking about it. For example, I might press E to quickly switch to the eraser, B to go back to the brush, or G to fill an area with color. There's no secret trick happening here. It's mostly just muscle memory from drawing for a long time. And for those wondering how the colors never go over the black line art, the answer is layers. You should keep your sketch, line art, and coloring on separate layers. The colors are placed on layers underneath the line art layer, so the black outlines always stay visible on top. Once you understand layers properly, coloring characters becomes much easier and way less stressful. Now it's time for one of the most important parts of the entire process, coloring. But before we continue, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me create more tutorials like this and lets me know you want to see more character design content. Honestly, colors can completely change how people react to your artwork. You could create an amazing drawing, but if the colors don't work well together, most people won't even stop to look at it. That's why you shouldn't be afraid to experiment with colors over and over again until something finally clicks. For example, in this character, I originally colored the outfit red, but later decided yellow worked much better for the overall mood and personality. And normally during personal projects, I change colors way more than what you see in this video.
Sometimes you finish coloring the whole character and suddenly realize the palette just doesn't feel right anymore, and that's completely normal. Don't get attached to the first color choice too quickly. Try different combinations, test new ideas, and be bold during the coloring stage. Most people notice the colors before they even understand what the artwork actually is. Color is usually the first thing that grabs attention, especially in thumbnails, social media posts, and character art. So spend extra time on your colors. A good color palette can make even a simple drawing feel professional.
Right after the base colors, I move on to the shading and lighting stage. Honestly, this is probably my favorite part of the entire process. I try not to overcomplicate shading too much. For the shadows, I usually use a slightly darker version of the main color. And for the light areas, I use a slightly brighter tone of that same color. And the moment you start adding shadows, the character instantly begins to feel more alive, more solid, and much more eye-catching. Every new shadow detail adds more personality to the character and somehow makes me feel even more connected to the artwork while drawing it. For the lighting effects, I use the tool next to the opacity settings at the top.
I usually keep it simple and add just a few lighter strokes using brighter tones from the main colors. One thing I really like about this method is how the stroke slowly fades out at the end while drawing, which creates a very soft and interesting effect. That was actually one of the biggest questions people asked in my previous videos. By the way, let me know in the comments, which stage of the process do you enjoy the most so far? Also, I'll leave my Patreon link in the description if you'd like to support the channel. Patreon supporters get access to exclusive content, early access to videos, and a huge archive of vector icon project files that can be downloaded without limits. So supporting the page also gives you a lot of useful resources in return. And finally, thank you to everyone who watched the video until the end. I really appreciate your support, and I'll see you again in the next video.